My teacher, Barzan, said, conduct for the last stand of violins. The first stand is already looking at you, and that is so true.
Welcome to another episode of Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and I'm so glad to have you here today. Check out our site, contrabassconversations.com, for the 10 years of podcasts that we've been doing. 263 episodes and going strong. Isn't that nuts? I'd also love it if you reach out, send me a message, Facebook, Twitter, or email. You can email me at feedback@contrabassconversations.com and say hi. Let me know a little bit about yourself. Give me a guest recommendation. That's how this show is built. And you know, the main way I book guests these days is from listener recommendations. I've got a list of over 400 people just from listeners. Over 400 people. Those are even people I've thought of. Isn't that crazy? So today's episode is a recommendation from Scott Rosenthal, who's a bassist I played with for years in Chicago. Scott encouraged me to reach out to Jonathan Haskell. Now, Scott grew up with Jonathan back in Chicago, and here's a word-for-word quote. I went back into my email and looked. This is what Scott wrote about Jonathan. A more interesting person you'll never meet, a consummate musician. And that's totally true. We had a great chat, Jonathan and I. Jonathan is a bassist in a great orchestra, the Orchestra de la Suisse Romande in Switzerland. He's also president of the Musicians Union. He's a conductor, accomplished conductor. He's conducted his orchestra several times. He's fluent in multiple languages, and this I was not expecting, but it's so cool. He's the author of 3 mystery novels. The first one, On the Beat, is a murder mystery centered around life in an orchestra. It involves a sadistic, villainous, and diabolical conductor, an undercover cop in the percussion section, and a Pirastro Flexocor E string as a murder weapon. This novel is set in Chicago and the north suburbs and downstate Illinois, and it brings back a lot of memories of me road warring it all around that part of the country. So you're going to have a blast with this conversation. Jonathan's a very entertaining, insightful guy, and we really dig into conducting. He has great perspectives in conducting, and I've done a lot of conducting over the years, and we really started to geek out on it. It was a fascinating conversation to me. And before we get going, I'd like to let you know a little bit about Derry-O Strings, our sponsor, and their Zyx strings. We're talking about Zyx strings this month. And they've got great sustain and attack for pizzicato playing, and they've got great bow response for arco playing also. So they're a good hybrid string if you play multiple styles or genres of music. You can get them in medium and light tension, and you can get them with the C extension as well. And they're USA made. They're designed, they're engineered, and they're crafted at the Derry-O factory in New York. So check them out. We've got a link in the show notes, and thank you for sponsoring the podcast. And I know you're going to enjoy this episode with Jonathan Haskell.
I showed up here and I was 23. I won the audition. Mm-hmm. I was already a French major when I was at the University of Chicago, so I already spoke fluent French, so I didn't feel like a total outcast here. Then, so I sort of fit in very easily. And in terms of being an American, well, in our orchestra, when I joined, there were 12 or 13 Americans, and we got up to 14 out of 112 people. So I wasn't the only American either.
Wow.
And being an expat, well, as it turns out, there aren't enough musicians in Switzerland to fill up an orchestra.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, because the small country, it now has 8 million people. So we have a lot of different nationalities. All Swiss orchestras do. We don't have a majority of Swiss people. A lot of French people, some Japanese, maybe 2 Russians, some no Koreans at the moment, 4 Chinese people, 1 English person, some Italians. So it's very mixed.
Oh, okay.
But it's not at all like I'm the sticking out like a sore thumb, and I never did. Yeah. So it's comfortable from the very beginning that way. Otherwise, in the other Swiss orchestras, there's plenty of Americans too. I know some of them, it's a small country, but it's not that small.
What language are rehearsals typically conducted in, or does it vary depending on the conductor?
It does indeed. The original foundation of the orchestra, the contract, it was posted one day for a joke, and they said the official language of the orchestra is French.
Okay.
That is the official language of the city. But if the conductor doesn't speak French, they always make a little speech and say, I don't speak French very well, we'll speak English. And so I'm happy to say that my colleagues, the vast majority of whom are now quite young, all get by in English. They all understand very well. So it's not a problem. So I guess the majority of conductors do speak English. And almost no one would dare to try and massacre French in front of us. They'd rather just speak English.
Right.
And of course, the less we speak would be the best.
Right.
No one tries to speak German to us. We could probably get by with that too, But no, they speak English and we understand. Our past music director was Nemi Järvi, a great old guy.
Yeah.
And he spoke English. He was a man of very few words. So, and even though he was in Detroit for, 15 or 20 years, whatever, he's an American citizen and everything, you could barely understand the guy in English. But he said so few words, his communication was done with the raising of an eyebrow or a little tilt of the wrists, and it was great.
Yeah, the fewer the words, the better. It's spoken like a true orchestral musician, for sure. That's great.
Well, definitely, although I always listen to them. Believe me, I look at them and I listen to them. It's not a problem.
Well, Nemi Järvi, since you brought him up, he, if I remember right, he was a real champion of Toobin's music, Eduard Toobin. I remember talking to him in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. A colleague of mine and we talked to him about and he was so excited to talk Toobin. Did you ever talk with him about Toobin or just Estonian music in general?
Not too much, but he's a man of great eclectic taste. There's no doubt about it. And I've discovered some music. Our last records with him were pieces by Jacques Ibert and Massenet, which no one knows, but which are really fantastic. Now, where he discovered them, don't ask me. Maybe he listens to YouTube. I don't know. I doubt he's going through libraries and leafing through scores, but his ambition is to make as many records as possible. So we've made some records pieces that are probably only recorded maximum of 2 or 3 other places. And that's hard to do now because you do a Beethoven, Brahms, Mozart, Mahler especially. It's been done so much and our product it's not interesting on the market. But whatever he's done has been interesting. He also had us discover this composer named Joachim Raff. I bet you never heard of him. R-A-F-F.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. Very interesting romantic music. Student of Liszt. Wrote a lot of stuff. It's good stuff. I mean, if you don't like Liszt, you may not like him at all. It's less bombastic than Liszt. Anyway, Järvi, a great man for exploring new avenues of music. Great for that. We didn't actually talk about Toobin. I remember him mentioning the name perhaps once.
Okay. Interesting. Well, yeah, and how exciting to be able to keep, especially in this day and age, to keep doing recordings of lesser performed pieces, not just another Beethoven 5 recording. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's so oversaturated at this point.
Well, yeah, recording is work. There's no doubt about it. Okay. And the thing about Järvi is, in all honesty, it's no secret. He worked real fast. And you can say what you want, but the results were there because anyone who's heard any of those Raff symphonies and the tone poems, there's 2 other versions out there, said that ours were the best and ours were the most spontaneous because he really does work fast. We didn't even do these pieces in concert at all. So he would rehearse them once, then maybe turn on the mics already, waiting for that freshness that was there. And meanwhile, we're all scrambling to get the notes or whatever. But the recording engineers were good, and the result is good. The result is very good. I urge you to listen to them if you have a chance. Raff, OSR, I mean, I'm sure they're out on YouTube. I'm not 100% sure. But I listen to them all the time. And likewise for Ibert and Massenet, good recording engineers, just, run through it twice, record it, touch it up. He doesn't even go downstairs to listen to the takes. He just trusts his engineers. He's been working with the same guys for a long time. So no waste of time. But like I said, his ambition was to make the most records of any conductor, and perhaps he's already reached that. I have no idea how many he's made, but hundreds and hundreds of recordings. But in any case, the result is good. So there. Of course, there are people against that on principle. You have to rehearse. But sometimes spontaneity is a really good thing.
Yeah, no kidding. And just being able to, capture the excitement of that, still like just getting the piece together versus like beating it down for the 12th or 13th time.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not like there's no depth. I will be honest that when I've heard the records a year and a half later, I said, I played on that? So we do work fast, but sorry, the result is good. His predecessor was Marek Janowski, a German. He didn't work that way. But likewise, he didn't flog a dead horse. But we did all the Bruckner symphonies with him, and I believe that they are highly regarded too by the critics. He managed to get us to have a Brucknerian sound, and we're not Germans, and none of our bass players are Germans, and none of them, they'll play the German rotary valve trumpet. Every trumpet player plays that nowadays, as far as I know. But he got a Bruckner sound out of us, and that was an interesting experiment. Now our next music director is Jonathan Knott. Nice first name, same as mine. Right. Certainly has broad musical interests without any doubt. He's a Mahler specialist. What he wants to record, I have no idea. He's not starting until January.
For people who aren't too familiar with the orchestra, could you maybe give us like what a typical season might look like for your orchestra, just in terms of weeks, where you play, time off, just a little window into the life of being a player in the group?
That's a very good question, because we are a different kind of orchestra than exists in the United States, because we play operas and symphonies. So we play 8 different operas a year, and we do 6 to 7 performances of each. Then we play 20 subscription concerts. Then we play some youth concerts. And then we play a few concerts that don't fall in either category. And we have 5 weeks off in a row in the summer. That's standard for Europe, as you might know. Plus another 2 weeks as compensation for having worked on Sundays and sometimes up after 11 o'clock at night. So the conditions are really quite excellent, I would say. And we don't do runouts in terrible places like Kankakee. Sorry if you're from Kankakee. We obviously, everything's beautiful here compared to Kankakee or Gary or whatever. But we only do runouts to a city called Lausanne, which is also on Lake Geneva. And that's about it. And tours, 1 a year. With the orchestra, this is, believe it or not, my 38th year. We've been to Japan 5 times. And otherwise a lot of European tours, the United States 4 times, and otherwise in Europe. And the tour conditions are, I have to admit, I don't think I'm doing anyone any disservice by saying it, our conditions are about the best of anyone. Say, I'm also president of the Musicians Union. I didn't tell you that. It's not that I'm responsible, huh? It was already that way.
Yeah.
But I have absolutely great conditions. I know people in the New York Philharmonic, the Berlin Philharmonic. We have great conditions here.
How many? And I love poor Kankakee. That's where I would stop off for gas on my way down to go play in Memphis. So
yeah. No. I know the Chicago Symphony still plays there, as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, they also go down to the University of Illinois and record in that beautiful hall, this Cranert Hall. So I know that they're making trips south every once in a while. How many bass players are in the section?
We have 9, and we're going to try and hold on to them because we don't have very much work for them this year. And but I don't think there's any political pressure not to replace me when I retire. There's one other person who's going to retire before me. We have 9, and we usually play with 8. On tour, we might play with 9. We bring 9 and leave one person out. And we all play 5-string basses except for 2 people in the contract. No one plays an extension.
Wow, everybody. Okay, wow, that's interesting.
It is, because there's one new Chinese girl named Ivy Wong, a great player. She has apparently purchased an extension bass, but I'm not sure she's going to play it in the orchestra or not. I fooled around with one maybe once or twice. That's it. I happen to play a 5-string that is perfectly playable. It's a Pullman from 1977, and the action is low, and I can play absolutely anything on it. Seriously. I know that on an extension there are things you can't do. Anyway, I'm just not interested in playing an extension. And the Pullman was made as a 5-string, and it's fine, you know. Obviously a great pedigreed instrument would be something else. But that's okay.
Well, and some of those Pullmans are especially when they're set up well, are fantastic instruments. One of the Lyric Opera of Chicago bass players has two Pullmans that are basically carbon copies of each other. One of them was owned by a bassist in the Metropolitan Opera, and he's done all this work with the fingerboard, and it is just, it plays like butter. It's an amazing...
It's already so hard, you may as well make it as easy as possible.
All right.
The fight about extension versus 5-string, I'm not even going to get into it because it's, if you could, I mean, it's like French bow, German bow, you know, you can play both very well. I can just say that there's some passages that are impossible on the extension. I know that for a fact. There's nothing that's impossible on the 5-string.
Yeah, try to play Beethoven 6, the storm scene on the extension. It doesn't work.
I wouldn't even dream of, no, I can imagine what it's like. Right. So there you have it.
Speaking of French bow and German bow, is there a predominance in Switzerland, or does it vary depending on where you are in the country?
I think the German bow in the whole country is probably dominant. And in my orchestra, it used to be, when I showed up there was one French bow player. Now it's half and half. All the young colleagues who've gotten in have been French bow players. They've been from places like, well, Ivy Wong, who's a Canadian Hong Kong citizen, and the French people are naturally French bow players, and our new Bulgarian bassist as well is a French bow player. And they play very well, and they have a big sound with it, which is indeed possible.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
I'm being nasty, I know.
What, in terms of instruments, does the orchestra own a set of instruments, or does everybody play their own instrument? How does that work?
No one plays their own instrument. We have money to buy the instruments, and we select them, and we have to be happy with the instrument we play, and otherwise naturally find donors to give money. And our oldest bass is a monstrous thing that no one wants to play anymore now that Steve Zlomke retired. It's I don't know how many inches it is, must be 42 inches or something like that. Plus it has an E-flat neck, so no one can play it without practicing it first. And it's, of course, you know, the top is the original maker and the sides are probably the original maker, and the back, it was replaced completely one day, so it's a bit of a bastardized instrument. But that was purchased for a certain amount of money 30 years ago, and otherwise we have mostly new instruments, but everyone has to be happy with their instrument. And we have extra instruments too, so we have quite a few instruments. Whenever there's a sub, we have what it takes. They're not in a hurry to sell things as long as we have room for them, and that's their business.
Sure. Do you use the same basses on tour that you use?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. In Italy, that's an interesting question. What happens to instruments on tours? Thankfully, nothing has happened to a bass ever on tour, and I've been here a real long time. Cellos, things have happened, and they're real nervous, the cellists. They try as hard as they can to get the cello on the plane in the seat next to them. If it's possible, if we have a charter or whatever, and the orchestra tries to accommodate them because, you know, an instrument's your life, and these cellos are very valuable instruments. In any case, it's part of you, you know, it's wood, it's part of you. And to see a cello with a broken neck or something is just one of the saddest thing imaginable. So there have been accidents, so the cellists, they manage to take their instruments as much as possible, whenever possible, in the plane with them. The bass, thankfully, nothing has ever happened to a bass. I guess it's just so big they can't drop it or something.
So the mandatory retirement age of 65, do you have a maximum audition-y age? I don't know if that's the right terminology, but like if you're over 35, can you still audition?
We never put that in the contract, and I think that's a good thing. And I just noticed, as president of the union, I have to approve the choices of for instance, the trombones in the upcoming audition. So I went through the list of all the 165 people applying with their ages and their nationalities next to them, and there were lots of people over 35, and they did accept them, especially if they already had a position. No, it's not a problem. It's just the retirement fund. You get the retirement that you put into it. You're not going to get a full retirement if you've only worked 25 years when you retire. You see what I mean? No age discrimination, just they make us retire at 65, which is a bummer because I'm really loving it, and I'm 62, so 3 more years of fun.
I'm really interested by how open just internationally? It sounds like the audition process is there. Are there any restrictions in terms of, like, if I wanted to audition and I live here in the United States and I get a spot, is there anything else I have to do in terms of being able to work in Switzerland?
Oh, no. If you won the audition, the orchestra gets the work permit without a problem, and the residence permit. No problem at all. And there was an American who was runner-up at the last audition. Where he was living in the States or not? I'm not 100% sure. He may have been in America, but I've read the list of the nationalities, and there's people from really all over the world. Whether they're all coming from all over the world, I don't know. They might already be in Europe. Because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that if you make it to the second round, the orchestra reimburses your fare, which would be an arm and a leg, especially transporting a bass.
Yeah, no kidding. What does the audition process look like for your orchestra in terms of, and I'm thinking kind of bass specific, like required solos, excerpts, what in general, just maybe a couple general things about what people play in auditions?
It's very, very conservative. It's always the darn Dittersdorf. It's always the Dittersdorf, even though I've tried to argue for a Bach suite, just like the New York Philharmonic had me play 38 years ago or 40 years ago. But everyone says, no, Bach, no, there's too many different ways of playing it, no, and we, no. And everyone, a lot of people fall on their face in the Dittersdorf. And so Dittersdorf and an orchestral excerpt, first round, behind a screen. Second round, usually not behind a screen. And then there's the only excerpts, the usual excerpts, Mozart, Beethoven, 5/9, Schubert 9. Then the final round, not behind a screen. And then you play your romantic concerto. It's usually a choice of Battistini or Kusevitsky. I don't think anyone's ever, maybe someone once played Van Hal. It's quite possible. And then some more excerpts. And then only discussion is allowed in the third round. We try to make it as fair as possible. I feel, I'm not responsible for it, but I feel that our audition rules are really top notch. And I've told people in the Philharmonic that they have to start implementing this, because the conductors have way too much power in the New York Philharmonic, and they're finally waking up to this. It's not that way with us. There's an audition committee. We really try and make it as fair as possible. We really, really do. And we have another rule that if no one gets a majority at the end, we keep on voting to see who does get a majority. Otherwise, we've had stalemate auditions where we've been sitting there all day and we just take no one, because everyone likes on 1/3 of the people like 3 different candidates. So then no one gets a majority. So then we say, okay, we'll go home. We'll do another audition. So everyone's wasted all their time. All these bass players are wasted their time coming there. So we invented a new rule. Our concertmaster at the time invented it, and he did the right thing. So we then re-vote, and then if someone gets a majority then, and we're, eliminating the candidate with the least votes each time. So we still have auditions where we take no one, which is, it happens, It happened for timpani, oddly enough.
Oh, wow.
Of all things.
But at least you have that in place, so it sounds like you're reducing the chances of that happening by having that re-vote. But
recently the tendency is, and I must admit that I've been shirking my responsibilities and not going to auditions recently, because enough is enough, because I'm supposed to be there. So if I find some other sucker to go, I send them another member of the committee. But recently the tendency has been they find 2 or 3 people they like and they want to try them out. And they ask the union, is that okay? And in the absence of me, they ask another member of the union committee, is that okay? Because that's not in our contract to ever do that. Yeah. And they say yes. And why shouldn't they? Because other orchestras always try out people. The thing is, though, that it might make the life of the musician a little tense for a year. They don't know what's going on. I got the job or not? And then after that, they decide whom they want, and then the person is on a trial year. That's how it works.
Okay.
But for instance, recently, principal oboe, very important position. Apparently 3 people in the audition were accepted to play a bunch of concerts with us this year. And I have nothing against that. I would never put my foot down and say, no, this is not right, because otherwise we just cancel the audition and do it all over again, which is just futile.
I'd love to know a little bit, and this is totally fascinating. I'd love to know a little bit about how you discovered the bass, and maybe just tell us the story of why French for an undergrad major. And I just love to. It sounds like you have a really interesting just background musically and otherwise. Can you just tell us a little bit about your early years in music?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Glencoe, and there was an orchestra program then. They used to have money for that, and I was in the fourth grade, and everyone tried out all the instruments, everyone who wanted to. So I tried to make a sound out of a clarinet, out of a flute. Bassoon, I don't think they even had, but maybe I'm wrong. Did I try and play the violin? I don't know. I certainly tried to play the cello, and that's what I wanted to do. Maybe I tried the bass, and then someone else was chosen to be the cello of the little grade school orchestra. So they said, would you mind playing the bass, Jonathan? So I was in fourth grade, and I said, okay. And it grew on me, maybe within a year. And so I kept on doing it. I had private lessons, etc. And in terms of French, well, in Glencoe, there was language instruction as of sixth grade. So seventh grade, I started to really get into French. And I guess it's just a natural affinity. I guess it's just some kind of resonance with me. I mean, I don't have a drop of French blood in me, but I just thought it was cool and all that. And then in the University of Chicago, you know that they have a million core courses you have to take. So I said I was a French major, yes, but there was still only one French course per trimester. I had to take natural science, physical science, a lot of other, and music, of course. I also took music. I wanted to compose then. I took composition. And so I was a French major, and I wanted to be a translator, a literary translator, because I thought that Camus was badly translated. As I read the end of Camus' The Stranger, I thought that the guy totally botched the translation, that he took much too much liberty. And I gave that up when I realized that it's really, really hard to translate.
Okay.
And then I went to music summer school in Switzerland already in 1973 at the suggestion of a girlfriend. And I had a great time. I mean, it was the first time. I'm from Illinois. I'm from Glencoe. The highest point in Illinois is Galena, Illinois, which is like 400 feet above sea level, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And I've in Switzerland, Geneva, got on a bus. It's nighttime. Started going up the mountain to 5,000 feet. I just couldn't believe you could drive that high with the lights in the mountains. It was incredible. So I spent that summer. Then I went back to the United States and came back in September and auditioned for the Basel Symphony at age 19. I got in. I had chops, and I auditioned for principal and 2D. Admittedly, principal at 19 would have been quite something. It happens, but no, it wasn't in tune enough to be principal. And I played in the orchestra for one season in Basel with a Japanese colleague who didn't speak English. So what did I speak with him? I think we spoke Spanish or Italian. I think Italian together. Whatever. He was a great guy, and we played also. Basel also plays opera and symphony. So it was great. But I was 19, and there were no other young people in the orchestra. The next youngest person was 29 then. No orchestra in the world is like that now. So no young people, no fun. And then I decided to transfer to Yale because I sort of on a whim, I actually thought that Gary Carr was still teaching there. Naturally, when I got there, that was his last year.
Okay.
It was Homer. Not a big deal, because I'm interested in lots of things. And in Yale, as it turns out, I was a music major, but it still wasn't I didn't study only music. I also studied French literature. I also studied German literature. And I also took a survey course in architecture with Vincent Scully, who at that time had already been teaching the same class for 25 years, was the greatest teacher I ever had, and opened my eyes to architecture. I'm from Chicago. I didn't appreciate anything in Chicago before then. Architecture is one of my great loves now. But just to appreciate it, just like listening to music, I just look at architecture wherever I am. I don't know anything about it. I do know about music, but that doesn't change much. Yeah. And then after Yale, I got my master's, so 3 years. Then I read that there was another audition in Switzerland for my orchestra. And I went over to study conducting with Leon Barzan. I was already there. I'm sorry, getting the chronology wrong. I was studying conducting privately with Leon Barzan. Read of the audition for my orchestra, the Orchestra Suisse Romande in Geneva, took the train down. My bridge fell over in the train because I pushed it against the wall. And I was reasonably cool about it because I arrived at 8 in the morning, and Switzerland goes to work real early in the morning. So I called up the most famous luthier and said, I got a problem, my bridge fell over. Soundpost 2, of course. Bridge is nothing, soundpost. He said, come on by. I was there at 8:30. I made it to the audition at 9:30. No problem.
Wow.
And at the time, I was a little bit less stressed. You know, as you get older, you get more stressed about things, you'll see. I won the audition. So, and then I started playing in the following year, which would have been 78 in the fall. And so this is now, must be my 38th season.
Wow. What inspired you to start studying conducting? What do you remember the moment when you became interested in that?
I really can't tell you, in fact, and it's maybe a silly reason. Maybe not. I used to think that conductors really did know more than I did or other musicians. And then when I was in Basel, I saw that that wasn't the case whatsoever. So then when I went to Yale, I studied conducting with Bill Harwood, who died in the 80s, unfortunately, and, of course, Otto Werner Müller, who recently passed away, who was fabulous for analysis of music. I mean, I learned so much from that man. And he then became teacher at Juilliard after that. But technique, Barzan, I'm a Barzanian student. Barzan was a disciple of Toscanini, and Toscanini was very mad at him that he didn't want to have a career. He was principal viola of the New York Philharmonic, and Toscanini really wanted him to make a big career, but he didn't. But anyway, Barzan, he really is my mentor, and I think of him often. There's not very many recordings of him. He's a man who he was an irascible person. He was someone who had the National Orchestra in New York for many, many years, and I even had an elderly cousin who recently passed away who played with him 60 years ago and said that if he saw that you weren't paying attention to him or looking at him, he would throw his baton at you. Because he thought of the baton as a great tool that you could use in it, not to injure people or throw at people, but he really controlled it magnificently with the fingers. And anyway, he was a man who made no compromises, fantastic man who wanted to show the music with your hands. And if every conductor were that way, it would be a better world. Because so many times I've heard about people who have careers, and the musicians tell me, it's the same thing with Bernstein, sorry, that the technique can't follow them. Admittedly, just to have someone beat time is not enough for a symphony, a good symphony orchestra, not at all. And whether you have charisma, that's another question. Bernstein certainly had that, but I mean, I saw hard to follow. And growing up in Chicago as a teenager, there was Giulini. I saw him conduct pictures from an exhibition. They practically fell apart, the Chicago Symphony in the second movement. The Gnomus, practically fell apart. I was there in the third row. That's how bad his technique was. That he won't be remembered for that. I'm just saying that Barzan taught me good technique, and you want someone with good technique, you got him.
That combination of technique, but giving the orchestra more than that. And like you said, charisma, it's such a fascinating mix of characteristics. Did that change? I'm sure it did, or maybe better question is like, how did starting to study conducting change your perspective from being in the bass section? I know for me, it was like night and day. I started to just like study the conductor so differently and like pick up tips and realize like, wow, he's rehearsing in a terrible way. Once I started conducting, how did the study of conducting change your section experience?
Well, it's true. When I showed up in the orchestra, I already had studied conducting with Otto Werner Müller and Barzan, and naturally we had someone like Wolfgang Sawallisch was our music director when I arrived. He had everything: excellent technique, fabulous musicality, and charisma. The only thing is, may he rest in peace, he didn't want to get his fingernails dirty with us. He thought we weren't very good, and he was happy to have the paycheck and just fly in for the rehearsals. No commitment whatsoever to the town or the orchestra, and he stayed music director for 10 years. Plus, he also did not include us on his official biography, which really hurts. And there's no reason for that whatsoever. Conductors are a very, very interesting breed, let me tell you. I have written 3 novels, and all of them talk about conductors, and I'll be happy to send them to you anytime you want. They have not been published yet.
Oh, wow.
would love to read. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Any orchestra musician would love to. I mean, I don't know where to self-publish it so that I would have that audience, you know, if you can turn, because I don't really care anymore if it's published. If it's read by other musicians, that's fine with me. I'm sure they'll get a laugh out of some of it. I'm sure they will.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. I didn't realize you did that. Yeah. We've got to find a way to get that out there. That's, well,
read it first.
Yeah. Okay. Well, since you've written 3 novels, you focus on conductors. I love, this might be and I have a broad audience. It's mostly bass players, but it's some other people too. What are maybe three of the biggest, I'm just kind of picking a number out of thin air, 3 of the biggest mistakes conductors make in terms of relationships with the orchestra? Like someone walks in and makes a buffoon of themselves. What are some of the more common mistakes conductors make? I mean, obviously you mentioned not listing on their bio, That's a big one.
Well, Janowski, as great a man as he was, and he's still alive, God bless him, he can lose his temper. I don't think it's so cool to lose your temper anymore. Maybe people think that, you know, George Sell, not a nice person. Reiner, not a nice person. Great musicians, great recording, different epic. Nowadays, more or less, everyone is trying their hardest in orchestras. You know, there's no slack-offs in my orchestra. Okay, everyone's trying. So there's no reason to ever lose patience. So losing patience, getting mad, I think that would really be a mistake. Then again, maybe some other musician would say that's what we need. Tough love, you know. I don't know. I don't buy it. Other mistakes would be, the worst mistake, Jason, would be simply bad taste. And bad taste would mean bad tempo and not balancing the brass. Letting the brass, that happens in the United States a lot, you know, especially, it used to happen in Chicago in Herseth's time. And Clevenger, probably not anymore. I don't know. I haven't lived there in so long. But balance mistakes. In other words, letting the brass and the percussion run wild and then taking tempos too fast. That's basically what you can do wrong as a conductor. That's interpretation. Otherwise, not respecting the score. I mean, you're talking about great composers. They really did know what they want. Not respecting the score or changing things to suit you, I think that's a faux pas.
Have you ever read, I've never talked about this book on the podcast, but have you ever read Gunther Schuller's book, The Complete Conductor, I think it's called?
No, I haven't. Oh. But I did work with him once or twice, in fact. I auditioned for him once for Tanglewood.
Oh, you would love that book. Everything you just mentioned about conductors, it's basically take that brilliant mind that Gunther Schuller is, and it's basically it's an incredibly well-researched book, but it's kind of a 500-page book on the biggest mistakes conductors make. And he has tables and graphs showing tempos, most common tempos out of all these different recordings. And that was one of the things that he talks about, is just like picking the wrong tempo. It's like what is your job as a conductor? Well, one of the primary things you do is set the tempo. And
yeah, well, you're absolutely right. And, but that's also a question of taste sometimes. Mm-hmm. For instance, someone like Janowski, the great man, he did Hindemith Symphonic Metamorphosen, and the tempo is clearly marked moderato in German, mäßig. He took it just too fast at the very beginning. And how can I say it's too fast? Well, because moderato means moderato. That's my opinion. So, I mean, you know, there's no getting over that. That's not so terribly important. But wrong tempo and letting the brass run wild or the percussion, bad idea. And of course, letting things, intonation, not correcting that. It's your job. I mean, conductors are paid a lot of money. I know quite a bit about how much they're paid. As president of the union, I'm on the board. I know what they're paid.
Do you think that let's say a conductor, because I'm sure we've all been there, and we hear something, not to pick on the woodwinds, but let's say something's happening in the woodwinds, and a conductor doesn't address it. I've always been interested in how often is it they don't want to just dig it and get their hands dirty, or are they just not able to hear that in the moment? I mean, maybe if they listen to a recording, they could isolate it. I've always wondered how much of it is either not having the skills to address it or not wanting to address it.
Well, exactly. The laziness, that would be a real sin for conducting. And as someone like Savalas, may he rest in peace, he would just let things go. He would just say, it's just not a good orchestra. It's okay. But he stayed on for 10 years anyway. And, you know, if you can't hear exactly which instrument it is, I don't think anyone's going to cast any aspersions if you just say, woodwinds, may we have you? Let's tune from the bottom. It's not a trick. It's a very good idea, and it's good for them, too. The woodwinds are very conscientious. They're always working in breaks and after rehearsals, always working on that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that could be a section that can not get along frequently in a lot of orchestras. It's good to hear that your folks are on good terms.
Egos are the big problem, you know, in everything.
Well, and especially with the chair, like, I mean, with something like you were mentioning, principal oboe, something like that, that's such a dominant line through the orchestral literature. You can understand how an ego might come along with that at the higher levels. Yeah,
you know, I saw a video of Pierre Monteux conducting the Chicago Symphony in the 50s. I didn't even know they made any videos back then. And Ray still doesn't lift his eyes up once. Even for Monteux, the nicest old guy you ever saw. That was my impression. That was my impression. I have conducted our orchestra on numerous occasions, more in the past than in the present. I noticed I always had the wind player's eyes. Very important. Now, the string players, that's another question. Principal players, yes, they will look at you. The backstand, no, unless some girl thinks you're cute or something. And that's a great orchestra. The great orchestras, they're all looking at you, at least out of the side of their eye, enough to know that a twitch of your baton would change everything. Because I have a friend who got to conduct the Concertgebouw when someone else canceled absolutely last minute because his baby was born. And he told me they follow everything. And you know something, it's not even hard to follow everything. All you have to do is look. But you see, it's all mindset, and you know, you're jealous of the conductor's the enemy, you're lazy, whatever. It's not because you don't know your part. It's real easy to look at your part and look up at the conductor too. Obviously, you and I do it because we're interested. If you're not interested, you don't want to conduct, and we don't want everyone to conduct either, do we? Certainly not.
Right.
I mean, you look up and you can follow anything. I mean, Yerby managed to get results from us. I told you he would get results by lifting an eyebrow or doing that, you know. But I mean, it is predicated upon looking at the conductor. That's the great communication. Communication without words. You know, it's easy to talk. It's easy to start explaining things. All right. The fourth cardinal sin, talking too much. You can tell a whole story. First of all, they're talking in English, so not everyone's going to understand. And even if it were in French, people would tune out immediately, unless it's a really good joke, you know. Good joke, there's no problem with that. Too many jokes, people don't like that either. It's hard to win. But we've had conductors who start speaking idiomatic English with us that even I didn't even speak when I lived there, but it's been a long time, like saying something goes south, something went south. We didn't say that one in 1974. We just didn't. Remember, I mean, I swear to you, we didn't. And so, you know, saying that to a French-speaking orchestra is just meaningless. Whether people understood what he meant, I don't know. But you got to remember whom you're talking to, you know?
I wonder if it's nerves or if it's just trying to get the orchestra to like you. I wonder why so many conductors fall into that trap, because that's like one of the big sins of a conductor, is just like not shutting up and letting the orchestra play.
Yeah, well, it could be the ego. We don't have that many people who talk too much, but you'd be surprised. A little goes a long way. And often, I'll be honest with you, since I'm not going to be sued or fired for this gesture, often I look over at my colleagues and I go, he just won't shut up. No, because if it's not germane, I really don't want to hear it, you know. Like the last conductor who conducted us, I won't tell you who it is, because he's alive and very famous. He said, oh yeah, when you conduct the Chicago Symphony, they're just so loud right away. You know, he was conducting his own music, a composer. I'm not going to tell you who it is. Don't ask me. But then he says, I prefer the Cleveland Orchestra. I mean, come on, man. What is this showing off, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, sorry.
No,
sorry. It's meaningless to us. It's meaningless. People are listening and, okay, they're listening, but, you know, maybe it doesn't bother them either. Maybe I listen too carefully. That's entirely possible. I can't help it. I'm not deaf. I'm not dumb. I listen. I understand what they're saying.
Well, and this music world is such a small world, even if they're saying that to prop themselves up somehow by name dropping these orchestras, where we all kind of know each other in this world. So it's a little bit a dangerous game when you start like, oh, I prefer this orchestra to that orchestra on the conductor's side.
It's a silly comment. Yeah. Anyway, maybe I'm the only person who even noticed,
Well, and then the other danger is like trying to describe what you could show gesturally, and that must be something you think about a lot. Like, did you have to stop and tell them softer or slower? Aren't those two things that probably you should be able to show?
Exactly. If everyone watched all the time, yes, and if people obeyed the left hand, But I'll be honest, very few people have ever made that gesture to the brass section. They've always had to stop and say. And I'll tell you honestly, if I were music director somewhere, I would say immediately, I don't want to sit here talking. I'm going to use my hand. Brass players, you see I go like that? Play one nuance less. Apparently George Sell, at one point with the Cleveland, said, play what you think is forte, okay? Now play what you think is mezzo forte and all that. And he apparently, I know this from someone who's from Cleveland. He fixed things that way. In any case, it's so cool to do it with your hand. Mm-hmm. But it is not happening very much, okay? And they probably don't want to play softer either. Not a lot has been being done with the gesture these days. Not in my career. That's when you stop and you have to say it's too loud, which in its own way sort of hurts your feelings. No bass section wants to be told they play too loud. It's very rare anyone says the violins play too loud. And of course we could be too loud, believe me. It's no one's fault. We don't know. Maybe our stage is very resonant. We're all young players now, except me and a few others. But we have good instruments. We have great strings. I play the Pirastro Eva Perazzi. Love them. Mm-hmm. And if we're too loud, we're too loud. That's okay. But you do that gesture to me, I play less loud. Yeah. And if the conductor does that gesture in a concert, man, I can stop playing completely just so that the whole sound of the bass section goes down. But I don't think that I'm typical in that regards, because I'm always watching, you see, and I'm not afraid to stop playing if it's for the good of the sound.
Boy, it's interesting. I haven't talked to very many people who've done the amount of conducting you've done, and I love talking about these topics. What could a conductor do, maybe gesturally or otherwise, to get more people to watch him? Is there anything that they should be doing technically? I mean, I guess like you said, just give a little speech at the beginning.
My opinion is they should be given when needed. Now, you're a guest conductor. If you're someone famous, you could say it nicely, and it might get something done. Mm-hmm. Some people's trick is to conduct so small that they have to watch. Now Järvi is like I told you. He really had almost no gesture at all. And sometimes he made us really, really work hard to be together. So that could be a trick, but I'm not sure I would advise it. I would conduct the orchestra once, then give a sincere little speech about saving time with watching the hand, the gestures. That's the art of conducting, after all. What your charisma, that's either there or it's not. You can't teach that.
Right.
And knowledge of the score, something you can learn at school. That's what you're supposed to be learning at school. And someone with Otto Werner Müller, well, his analysis of the score, if you analyze something like Beethoven Leonore Overture No. 3, it can only make you a better musician to understand how he composed Beethoven. It can only make you better.
What's your score study process? Let's say you were going to conduct a concert this season. When would you start looking at, and maybe it was one new work and some classics that how would you get yourself ready for that week of conducting?
All right. Well, as a matter of fact, I just conducted last week. It was members of my orchestra, but not listed under their name because that's not allowed by the administration. It was at a festival a few miles outside of Geneva. The repertory was Egmont Overture, Schumann Cello Concerto, Beethoven Second. I chose the program outside of the cello concerto. I really know Egmont very well. I have conducted it. I have studied it. I really know Beethoven Second. So there was really no reason for me to start studying that 2 months before. I thought that would be a mistake, that I would keep it fresher the later I waited. So maybe I would say 2 weeks before. I have a long career and I've played this stuff and I know how I want it. So, and then maybe I'll listen to some historic recordings for tempo questions, because there are some variance in Egmont Overture. There's some people who take that amazingly slow. You would not believe it. Anyway, I took a normal tempo. But then, since I'm the age I am and I played this so much and I studied it so much once, I just know how I want it to sound already. So, unless I want to do it by heart, which I don't, because I don't do it enough. So I don't do it by heart, but when I look at the score, after, this is like 1 week before the concert, I know what I want. I know how I want it to sound. And otherwise, I study all the voices to know where they come in, and I'm a big believer in eye contact, because I have to tell you, I didn't mention this. I did this concert with one rehearsal, which no orchestra does. So it's a bit of a feat, okay? What it means is you have to be absolutely efficient. No blah, blah whatsoever, and pick the right musicians and trust them, which I do. So it went very well. Beethoven second, one rehearsal. I had to explain almost nothing. I did it all with my body language, and everyone was extremely happy with me. And so it was a great experience. But I didn't have to pour over the score endlessly. I knew how I wanted it to sound, and but this is this piece. If it were a piece I'd never played before, if that's your question, I would certainly start studying it way before the orchestration, etc., trying to hear the inner voices. But if this is repertory, Beethoven is Beethoven after all. And the Schumann I also know extremely well. Probably could sing through the whole piece if I wanted to. We played it a lot. Every orchestra plays that piece a lot.
Do you think there are any advantages to doing a piece from memory, from the conducting perspective? I've conducted from memory a few times myself. I like not having that stand in my way. Obviously not for new work, but I think Gunther Schuller in that book I was talking about, he never wants to play from memory because he thinks that the conductor is all you're doing up there is just trying to remember what comes next, and you're not engaging in the moment.
Good point. Absolutely good point. Well, David Zinman told me, he said he liked having the score there. He said there could always be a new inspiration in there. Mm-hmm. Looking at it. And I sort of feel that way too. Yeah. So it's not because I'm a lazy bum.
Yeah.
I mean, some people take a very macho attitude towards conducting, you see. I think that's a little bit of the macho attitude, to want to do things by heart. Then again, if you start as a pianist, which many of them have, you have the discipline, or a violinist, of doing many things by heart. I don't have that. I never did. I don't think it makes a difference. But it's very impressive to people if you're a genius or a photographic memory and you can do everything by heart. Obviously, that will impress a lot of people. And it will impress orchestra musicians as well. But it's not the whole picture at all. It's not. But I mean, you're right, having the stand in the way. Well, put it down lower and you should be okay.
Yeah. And there's something about just like, if the whole point is to bring out the music of that composer and fidelity, there is something, I don't know, just about having that actual text in front of you and you're all, bringing this music to life that it just seems kind of right to me to have that music there. I don't know.
There's a big difference between turning the pages and staring at it the whole time. And let me tell you, I've had a lot of people staring at it with their nose in the score the whole time. So, I didn't do it by heart, but I would say that it would be very hard to have more eye contact with the musicians than I had last week. Seriously, I'm not trying to flatter. I'm not trying to butter myself up. It's just the fact. There's very much a lot of eye contact. Your eyes can be various places at once, especially if you know the piece. The Beethoven, what's going by here. You want to bring this out. You want more sound there. You turn to people. You're active. And that's my school. Put it that way. Whether it's good or not, that's for the world to decide. But the eye contact is there. I think it's important. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Now I was reading some interview with maybe Larry Radcliffe or one of these conductors here in the States, and one of the first things he said is, if you want the musicians to look at you, you have to look at them. You just have to. I mean, has to be there.
But there are people who won't look up. I mean, like the back of the violins usually. And my teacher Barzan said, conduct for the last stand of violins. The first stand is already looking at you, and that is so true. And if I had to make that speech next year when I do this same gig, maybe I will. I mean, I know all these people, okay? Some of them are personal friends, and they're all colleagues, but it's not a problem. And then again, there's looking at people. You can look at someone out of the corner of your eye, and you can look them right in the eye. Up to you.
Right, exactly. Oh man, this is great, Jonathan. I want to be respectful of your time. I don't want to eat up your whole day here. But this is fantastic. Is there anything else you want to get out there to folks, or anything that I can link up to? I mean, I'll link up to the orchestra. Anything at all?
Well, not yet. Read my books, and then we'll figure out a way to get orchestra players to read them. I don't care about getting them published. If they read them and people get a laugh out of them, that's fine with me. And good enough.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the great chat, and I hope to see you in person one of these days soon. Got just one bit of news for you before we wrap up here today, talking to you about the Twin Cities Bass Camp. They're offering a winter weekend workshop, January 6th, 7th, and 8th, 2017. The faculty will include Etienne LaFrance, Daniel Thatcher, Maggie Haspatcher, Sandra Osland, Sarah House, Doan Rosler, and Anthony Cox. The workshop will be held at Walker West Music Academy in St. Paul. If you've ever been to St. Paul in January, it's quite cold, but that's a great faculty lineup, so check it out if you can. This winter, they'll have a special focus on how we use our bodies in a healthy way to play the bass. And this will include warming up, stretching, relaxation, and how we're standing and moving in relationship to the bass and bow. It will especially mean learning how we can have more fun for longer periods of time for the rest of our lives playing the bass. That's a great mission. Sounds good. And the schedule is faculty recitals on the evenings of January 6th and 7th, workshops, ensembles, and master classes January 7th and 8th, final concert late afternoon on January 8th. It's open to all bassists at all levels and all ages, dedicated to the art of playing the bass and to having a great time while learning and opening new horizons for everyone on the instrument. You can check it out at tcbasscamp.com, and we have a link in the show notes. So thank you for listening today. Thanks for following along with this podcast. I love how some people call this a project. And it is a project of sorts. It is a show, but it also is a project. And the project is building this library, this oral history of the bass, and synthesizing all this information into kind of the next generation of educational materials is what I think of. That sounds incredibly pretentious as I say it now, but there it is. So anyway, thank you for listening. Reach out to me, feedback@contrabassconversations.com. Share this with a friend. Go back through the hundreds at this point of episodes in the archives. Listen to Winning the Audition. There's a link on the front page if you want to get your audition game going to the next level, or check out Rob Knopper's episode that we had a few back. Many more of those thematic episodes to come. I'm working on that every week, and I'll have news to share with you soon on that. So thank you, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.